done. Amara, tell your friends. Drums of dawn on the chasm. Got a hand? Hands up.
Hello, this is some old guy in Hawaii, and this is Giant Killer Amara, a build centered around Terror Ammo Regen and the Sleeping Giant SMG. Terror Ammo Regen allows us to fire our weapon almost indefinitely without reloading. The Sleeping Giant buffs any or all its main stats randomly upon reload. Maximum buffs double the rate of fire and multiply the damage by 5. Those boosted stats plus Terror Ammo Regen turn this relatively modest SMG into a buzzsaw that rips through enemies in an extremely satisfying way. This is not a new idea. Many attempted this build a year ago during the first Bloody Harvest event with very mediocre results. Turn mechanics were brand new back then, and the Sleeping Giant was a different weapon. It didn't have the damage or mag size to make the idea viable, and the randomness of the buffs made getting the right ones tedious. The October 15, 2020 patch, however, changed all that, giving it more damage, a 1 in 3 chance to buff all stats to maximum upon reload, and double the magazine size. These changes are tailor-made for Terror Ammo Regen, perhaps even more so than the Lucky 7, and can make the weapon an absolute terror, pun completely intended. Okay, this is the skill tree. I'm not going to explain every point because 1, it's kind of boring, and 2, I don't consider this a fully optimized build. There are maybe better ways to place some points. I just know that this build works, but you may want to move a few things around. Additional options are also likely when the new skill trees are available. I'm only going to point to a few key choices. This build is all about killing quickly with pure elemental gun damage. We don't care about damage over time aside from minimizing its ability to kill us, which is why we put 2 points into steady hands to avoid killing ourselves with anima. That's also why we put 3 points into infusion. That plus forceful expression provides 36% of the listed gun damage in the form of our action skill element. Now, along with gun and anointment choices, this gives us the option of using up to 3 different elements simultaneously. More on that in a moment. Additionally, given the build's massive DPS output, we only put 1 vice 2 points in sustainment. It's that good. Feel free to move a point over from Catharsis or Conflex, however, if you prefer more. Action skill wise, most of the time we favoritize the Bind and Revelations, at least from mobbing. Phase Cast is a valid alternative, though especially for a boss. Stillness of Mind, maybe Soul Sap instead of Revelation. Again, not necessarily optimized, we have options. Okay, enough about the skill tree. Now for the guns, or rather the gun. The Sleeping Giant, the business end of the build, comes in 720 different variants based on parts and not including elements or anointments. It comes in fire, corrosion, shock, and non-elemental variants. There are also ×2 variants with the adapting prefix. It's a world drop with an increased chance to drop from One Punch Man in Electro City, who also drops the 1 punch chunk. It's not too hard to farm. Plenty of videos out there on how to do that. Okay. For this build, we want single shot elemental variants with the larger 50 or 55 round magazines. Avoid the ×2 variants, which consume 2 ammo per shot, and the smaller mags, both of which decrease the effectiveness of the Terror Ammo Regen and our ability to maintain continuous fire without reloading. Now, weapon elements should be paired with ASC next 2 mags elemental damage anointments, both matching and different elements. Look for shock plus ASC fire, shock plus ASC corrosion, and shock plus ASC shock. Same for fire and corrosive weapons. Why? With 3 points in infusion plus forceful expression, this is the elemental gun damage relative to the listed gun damage done by each element before adjustments for element versus target type. Notice that the ASC anointment tops the list at 100%, followed by the weapon element with the action skill element at the bottom. Now, this considers only gun damage. It does not include action skill damage effects. This setup, though, allows us to tailor our elemental damage mix based on the enemies we expect to face. For instance, corrosion with fire ASC or fire with corrosion ASC plus shock action skill works very well in Slaughter Shaft with its many triple bar enemies. Conversely, for the Guardian takedown, shock with corrosion ASC is preferable. Use fire action skill when dealing with the Necrotophaean creature areas. Then switch to shock action skill for the rest, because guardians are all armor and shields. For tanky single type bosses like Psycho Reaver, we match gun element, AAC element, and action skill. So despite using only one weapon, we have a lot of flexibility. Now there are other options, many of which I have not tested, like AAC cryo or radiation anoints. I have tested URAD anointments paired with a front loader shield, and that setup can be very effective, at least with general mobbing and slaughter shaft. Okay. I saw a friend do quite well with a cryo URAD version. He actually took down Wotan with it, with a cryo gun. Okay. Tanky single type target bosses also might be much better approach with a 250 phase cast or consecutive hits anointment. Okay, those are on my list to try. What I know for sure, however, is that this build works well with the combos of the 3 base elements as I've laid them out. So that's the business end of the build. On the back side, all we need is a grenade with AAC generate Terror and a shield with Terror Ammo Regen. Any will do. Shield-wise, I favor stopgaps and transformers. URAD requires a front loader. I've tested Frozen Hearts, Recharges, Big Boom Blasters, and others. We can use whatever we like as long as it has Terror Ammo Regen. Same for the grenade as long as it has ASC Apply Terror. Hexes, CMTs, Quasars, Storms, or whatever we feel will add to the damage mix we can do. That's the gun, shield, and grenade. What about comms and artifacts? Well, we can use a variety of comms, almost any artifact, legendary or otherwise. Okay, I'll get to the comms in a moment. The most important aspect of either, however, are the passive traits. At least one of them, comm or artifact, should have a plus magazine size passive. Terror Ammo Regen adds back a percentage of our total mag size. That's why we use the 50 and 55 round variants, why we take Deep Well, and why a mag size passive is so important. One passive gets this number above 70, which is the minimum we shoot for. 2 will take it into the 90s or even 100s, and higher is always better. With 100 plus mag and max terror, we can hold down the trigger and rarely glance down at the ammo counter. Okay, so magazine booster number 1, at least 1 is pretty much required, 2 is better. After that, try for anything that increases damage. SMG damage, weapon damage, doll damage, crit damage, elemental damage, etc. Okay. Action skill cooldown rate boosts are also helpful on one or both. Action skill cooldown is a tricky topic, so I won't go into it here. There is a link to a video I did on it in the description below. As for the actual class mod, most of the time I use this Phase Zerker, and I rarely stack rush stacks by fake grasping. I don't need to do it. Breakers, though, drivers, and golden rules can also work depending upon situation and playstyle. We have options. Amara's new class mod, not yet available as of this post, has major possibilities if paired with a white elephant artifact. Artifact-wise, any will do. Now, that's not to say that specific legendary artifacts can improve the build's effectiveness. I just haven't spent that much time trying them out. I've stuck mainly to this last stand, and not for the named traits, but again for the passives. And that's the build, but how does it work in practice? Okay, aside from point and shoot, there are a few things we need to do to make it work. Some of these are optional, but this is how I play the build. Now, given the random nature of the buffs, we need to equip our chosen Sleeping Giant before going into combat to include firing, reloading, and repeating that cycle till we know we've maxed out fire rate and damage. Now, fire rate is easy. If it looks and more importantly sounds like a buzzsaw, we're all set. Okay. Damage requires a target. Jack dummy or a vehicle work fine. Damage can be boosted 2, 2.5, or 5 times, and we want to go with 5. So we fire a few rounds to establish the base. Then reload, fire, and repeat until the numbers are 5 times that base, and we hear that buzzsaw. Then we top off the mag with Terror, and go to town. Now, the obvious downside to the build is that we can't quickly swap and test weapons in the field. Okay, the bonuses hold through fast travel, zone gates, and even changing our mayhem modifiers. But we lose them if we reload, save quit, swap equip weapons, or swap 2 weapons from our backpack. We can fire and reload over and over till we get the buzzsaw rate of fire, but what about the damage buff? Okay, not all maps have catcher eyes for destructing a vehicle to test on, and we may not be willing or able to travel all the way back to Sanctuary and the Jack dummy. Also, once in a while, we may even reload by accident. Okay, we get so wrapped up running, shooting, and dodging that we forget the fake grass, we lose ammo regen, and empty our magazine. Or we hit the reload button by accident, and the bonus is reset. Okay, then what? Well, there's pretty much only one thing we can do. We reload and fire till we get that buzzsaw sound, then we start shooting at enemies. If the damage is what it should be, we carry on. If not, we reload and repeat the process. Yes, it's a bit of a pain and dicey when it happens in combat. It also takes more concentration if Terror Ammo Regen is in full effect while we're trying to reload. It is what it is. Played enough though, and what to do when the shit hits the fan becomes second nature. And it's also a small price to pay for awesome DPS, and there are things we can do to minimize it happening accidentally in combat. Okay. Number one, reload buttons. I don't know how console controllers are laid out, but on PC the standard reload button is right above the action skill button, and we do not want to accidentally hit one when going for the other. So after several instances of that very thing happening, I remapped my reload button. Okay, I can remap it back for other builds, but I've actually gotten used to its new home. That's my solution. If you play on console, you may have to rethink the mapping, or it may not be an issue. Whatever the case, PC or console, I leave that to you. Number two, only equip one weapon. Leave the other weapon slots empty. If we only equip one weapon, we can accidentally swap to another and lose our bonuses. And if we go down, we don't need a separate fight for your life weapon. The Sleeping Giant will get us back up just as fast, if not faster. Mayhem modifiers. Once M11 drops, we can forget about them. If we prefer not to do that, however, avoid any modifiers that counter our gun and or ASC and or action skill elements. Avoid anything that conveys fire, shock, or corrosive resistance or immunity on the enemy. Beyond that, it's personal preference. I love Speed Demon, but Galaxy Brain makes getting crits easier. I'm a big holy crit fan, although it can be problematic for a hard to crit enemy that cuts the non-crit damage in half. Again, personal preference. Beyond all that, this is a simple single target weapon. Okay, think of it as a Monarch without the movement penalties, no reload, and much better accuracy, and use it accordingly. Rip through one ad, then the next, etc. Use ties that bind and whittle down groups when mobbing. Go for crits. Use Avatar with discipline to space out ties that bind group kills, especially with heavy mobs like during Guardian Crystal charging. Okay. Speaking of the Guardians, I have only completed Scaled and Guardian takedown, Scaled Molly 1 and Guardian takedown with these builds. Okay, I got all the way to Wold 10 on true takedown mode on a lark during early testing when I knew less about the build than I do now before going down. Okay, can this manage true takedown? Molly 1 probably, Guardian maybe. I'll let you know if or when that happens. Not every good build, however, needs to do that. A good build just needs to be fun. And trust me, when you start playing with this build, you will have fun. Okay, and that's it. If you got any comments or questions, drop them below. Leave a like if you can. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Come check me out on twitchtv.com/SummoGuy in Hawaii. And as always, stay safe and thanks for watching.